Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Time Travel. How come people can travel through time but not teleport? The Earth is moving, so you have to, travel through time and relocate to a different part of the solar system. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Corner Bistro. Come try the highest rated burger in the Zagat Guide at the Corner Bistro. Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I'm Todd.
And this is a film analysis podcast where we like to review, talk about movies, sometimes TV shows as of late, and kind of pick them apart from the perspective of people who are familiar working on these, both in front of the camera, behind the camera, in post, and pre-production. I think we've touched every single part of the production process, almost. Definitely in our own lives as we work on these sets. But even on the show, we've kind of touched on most of these aspects. We talk about editing, we talk about cinematography, we've talked a lot about acting and a little bit, screenwriting and storytelling, all these different aspects. But there is so much to it. I mean, pre-production is when all of, I think for me, pre-production is where all the magic happens. When you write the script, when you figure out where you're going to shoot it, there's a lot to it. But before we get into that aspect that I really want to talk about,
Insane.
Badass. So if you're not a part of our Patreon, we just kind of went on a huge 40 minute escapade about the audition process. And so I don't know if we'll release that as an exclusive to our Patreons or our patrons. I still don't know what to call those beautiful people. Or I'll release patrons, or release it as a bonus episode on interactual stuff. But maybe they'll all eventually be bonus episodes. I don't know. And so anyway, subscribe to our Patreon if you want to hear that breakdown analysis of how Todd did at the audition that we're doing right now, as well as all the other intricacies that we make on my views on the audition process, what it's like to look through 300 to 400 submissions, and what makes for a good monologue versus a bad monologue, and a lot of other weird little insights into that whole world and process.
If you're an actor or just interested in it, it's got a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Sweet. What are we covering today?
Today, we are covering Parasite. Best film of the year, apparently, last year. And so if you haven't seen Parasite, make sure to pause this episode and go watch it. We're going to be giving away a lot of stuff, and there's some stuff that you want to know by watching the film rather than us telling you. So, spoiler alert.
Copy that. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We'll touch on cinematography and the writing and the story, and we'll also talk about something we haven't really specifically spelled out, I don't think, which is contextualizing art. And I'll explain what I mean by that and how it applies to Parasite, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, I need to explain my eye, just like I explained in the other pre-episode thing. I had a weed whacker accident a few days ago. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. This whole situation, it's going to be fine. I'm going to get back to the ugly self that I am. However, you're going to have to look at this wonky thing for the next 45 minutes or however long this episode is. So, a synopsis of Parasite. Greeting class symbiotic relationship between the wealthy Park family and the destitute Kim clan. It's directed by and screenplay by Bong Joon Ho, but also screenplay by Jin-won Han, and cinematography by Kyung-pyo Hong, featuring Kang-ho Song as Mr. Kim, So-dam Park as Jessica, Jeong-eun Lee as Miss Kim, Woo-sik Choi as Ki Taek, and Sun-kyun Lee as the father.
Well done, man. I don't have a soundbite. This is all in Korean, and so I don't think that would play well, all things considered. And so I just finished watching this for the second time. What I know you saw this in theater. Was the second viewing different from the first viewing for you?
For me, it was more enjoyable. I feel like the first time I just kept, well, we've already given this spoiler alert, but I just kept waiting for stuff to happen, and I guess, it's the whole Western, situation that happens. Like we just beat people over the head with situations, right? Things that happen. Like this situation occurs and then this thing happens because of that situation. And then another situation occurs and this thing happens. And that doesn't, it does happen in this movie, don't get me wrong, but nothing, you just keep waiting for the hand to drop, and it never fully does. I mean, obviously it does at the end, or towards the end, but I just kept waiting for stuff. And I think because of that, I didn't really enjoy it as much as I would have. So it's kind of almost the opposite kind of movie than other movies that we watch, because most other movies is like, I don't want to know anything about it. And it's more enjoyable because I'm learning as I'm watching it. But this one, the second time I watched it, because I knew what was happening and knew what was going on, I was able to enjoy it more. I was able to enjoy the moments that happened, the situations that arose, the things that occurred because of them, and the light things, like the little things, right? Which is why this movie was so, so damn good, right? It was so like heightened, like film of the year. Because of all the little things. And I did end up really liking it a whole lot the second time. First time I liked it. I enjoyed it. But film of the year, no way in hell. I would have, there are two other movies I could have thrown at that title, right now. But it's the second time was definitely more enjoyable for that reason, which is weird. But the performances were fantastic. The directing is amazing. Cinematography, I got no words for the cinematography. Oh my God. The house they built, unbelievable. The depiction of the the destitution that of the poor family, and then the dichotomy of the two was just painted really well. And like the twists and stuff that happened, they were fantastic. But yeah, I enjoyed it a whole lot more the second time.
That's so funny. You? Yeah, because I had the almost same exact experience, just because I enjoyed it so much more the second time. I think the reason I didn't enjoy it the first time was similar in the sense that I was anticipating, but it was the tension that I felt the whole time, that I was like, when is this, are they going to get caught? Is this going to go wrong? I felt anxious all the time. And part of it was waiting for something bad to happen, but the other part of it was, like you said, waiting for something to happen. Because for ages, until, and it doesn't happen until you hit that midpoint, and, the lady gets kicked down the stairs and bonks her head, and you're just like kind of winded by that whole experience. And you're just like, what is happening downstairs now? And you're spending all this time upstairs. And so once you kind of removed all that tension, I really did enjoy it more the second time. It's the strangest. I wouldn't say I have that experience very often, maybe a handful of times. And in this case, I was certainly like more in tune and more interested in the nuances of the characters and how they were treating each other. There was just so much more play that I was paying attention to, I think, or enjoying, I should say. And yeah, I don't know. It took me a little bit more by surprise, because I also got to see it, I think, before all the hype was there, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But seeing it, before you find out that it's, which I think is you and I both saw it before it got Best Picture status, I believe. Yeah. And that helps a lot, because it's really hard to meet those expectations when you figure out, oh, this was the best movie of the year. Fine, then prove it. And then you walk in and you're just kind of sitting around for, an hour before anything happens. Otherwise you might be fooled into thinking this is a Korean drama over stuff that, I guess. But I was super happy. I like Bong Joon Ho a lot as a director and as a writer. And so I don't know that I make him appointment setting, but I'm always aware whenever he makes something new, and I'm likely going to watch it. But I just might take my time. Like if you hadn't wanted to watch Okja, I probably wouldn't have sat down to watch that thing ever, just because the premise didn't really interest me. But because you were like, hey, let's sit down and watch this movie, I was like, yeah, okay. Like it's Bong Joon Ho, I'm not going to be upset. But yeah, so anytime he makes something, and whenever something of his starts to get like a little bit of a fervor behind it, then it amps up the stakes in a way that excites me, because my groundswell of fervor comes from the indie community. And so before it starts hitting Oscar rounds, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to see this thing. And his character work is always amazing, just because he's going to take you places that you just would not assume a film would ever want to take you. And he does such a great job of world building and buying in and shooting. Like he likes a lot of these wide angle shots, mediums, and he's going to track, and he's going to be patient before he like moves the camera. Like he might have it set up for a minute before, and you might think, oh, this is a locked off shot, before suddenly it moves. And then you're like, oh, we're revealing something else. Like there's a scene where the family is watching men out the window as he's battling this guy who's peeing in the alleyway. And we're doing this angle and reverse angle. We're watching men, and then we're watching family, and back and forth. And then we're watching the family again. And they're like, yeah, men is amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then the camera just dollies over as he opens the door and enters. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess we were on rails the whole time. Like, I didn't know that. But it's just this patient way of storytelling that it's efficient, and it's also making you feel like you're in the world. And he just does, with all of his films, an amazing job at choreography and blocking. So if you want to study that and understand how to really tell a story in an environment that grounds it in a believable way, then you could not do better than watching Bong Joon Ho films. Especially once you get to my reco at the end of the episode, you'll get a great one, my favorite one of his. So I'm excited about that.
We're gonna pick the same one. I did hear that this screenplay was based off his own life, an experience of his own life.
Oh wow.
I don't know to what extent, but I believe that his mother would like clean the like houses of like very rich people, and he didn't have any money, and they were like very poor and lived in like almost like a cellar, very similar to this situation. And so I think that's one of the reasons probably why it's so good, because he pulled from his own experience. So I think let that be a lesson to any writer or director or any artist out there. You are your own stories, like pull from your experiences so that you can tell the story in a true and honest way. Right. And that's what's going to relate to people. I mean, you can think about it, man. You can pick. There are so many stories. There's so many possibilities of stories. And the only reason why there's so many possibilities is because there's so many things that can happen, that have happened. But it's harder for you to just make something up and for it to be honest and believable and real if you've never experienced any of it at all. And it's not to say that you can't do it. Obviously, like Finding Nemo, you're not a fish, but maybe you lost your son at one point, even if it was for a short time, and that feeling, right? And that's what you tap into to write a script like Finding Nemo, right? It's not that you're a fish, but it is that whole drive, like I will never stop until, and I feel like, obviously that's one of the reasons why a movie like this could relate to so many people rather than some of his other films that are just so fantastical, that, whatever, they couldn't have happened, at least in that way. But in this regard, I'll bet this kind of thing has, maybe not all of it has happened before, but at least the dichotomy of, so poor with, right up, butting up against the so rich and what that feels like. I mean, I personally have been a personal assistant for some very rich people when I lived in LA, and it is the worst feeling in the world. It is terrible. Anybody who does that job, you are a saint, and you're very what is it comfortable in your own skin, and you know yourself, and kudos to you. I was not, and I was miserable. I had no money, and just being around such opulence and waste was unreal. I mean, thousands of dollars just thrown to the wayside. Whereas, I'm sitting here like wondering if I had enough money to buy ramen for the week, and it was very good for me personally, because I knew I will never live like that ever. But at the same time, it just felt terrible. So I can only imagine. But yeah, I think that, pulling from your own experiences is at least a good way to start. And then obviously you can take it in its own, fantastical direction if you'd want, but it's got to be grounded in something that's real. I feel like,
No, you absolutely. I mean, especially, if you figure out the kind of storyteller that you are. And for me, and I think you and a lot of our listeners, like, we are the type that appreciate grounded, reality, dramatic stuff. And in order to do that effectively, you have to start from a place of personal investment. And if you don't have something to pull on, then maybe you just need to get out there more, or maybe read some books, or or just review your life in a different way. Because, like you said, you don't have to have lost your son permanently, but being in a grocery store and suddenly you turn around and your son's not there, there is a panic that sets in, and suddenly you can see how that can paint a scene, or paint how a character goes about achieving a goal. There's a lot you can do with that, and it's never ending. The more you start to analyze, and I remember after, as a writer, I was always aware of my life and my circumstances, and I've had a very dramatic life. But it wasn't until I was an actor that I began to appreciate how I responded and how I reacted to things. That gave me a whole new perspective on what it means to write those moments. And so being an actor, I think, more greatly informed how I wrote, even more than whenever I was studying and working on being a writer. And for that, I just forever grateful whenever I work on a new project and suddenly I'm like, oh, here's what the scene really means, and here's what it needs to be and what it's trying to be. Here's the best of it, and here's the ways that I can identify and relate to that, and kind of move forward.
Awesome.
But diving a little bit into the cinematography stuff, I don't have a ton here. I got really wrapped up in trying to pick apart some of the story stuff, and I failed miserably, but we'll get into that in a minute. But cinematography wise, there was a few shots that I really enjoyed. There was these detail shots, because I don't think Bong Joon Ho does a ton of detail shots, but there was a couple that kind of caught my eye, and I just thought were fun. Even in his style, they weren't really even close-ups, the ones that I'm looking at. They were just kind of these medium close-ups. And it's when what's his name, Taek, picks up Da-hai's hand. The English tutor picks up the student's hand, the wrist, right, and he feels their heartbeat. And we shoot to this kind of medium close-up of him picking the hand up and doing his thing. And then we also see that insert again whenever he sets it down, sets it into place. And then from there, we cut directly to another detail shot of the money being counted. Like, that moment spoke so highly to the mother that she's paying. Like, she is excited to pay now. And she has to have this guy. And it's just this very simple, clever tie-in of used visually to kind of compel the story forward about why she's reacting the way she is. And it kind of plays into, I think, a little bit more of her gullibility and how much money they have and how sensitive she is to her children and how much she loves her children. Even though she's, I don't know, I don't want to get into judging her parenting skills or her just gullibility as they keep kind of pounding on in the film. There's another really fun shot that I liked. There was one shot that they definitely crossed the line, or they break the 180-degree rule, which is, if you're not familiar with the 180 rule, it's the idea that you usually shoot a scene in order to not cross the eye line. Like in any one scene, the camera stays on one side of an eye line. So if you imagine two people sitting at a table, and imagine it like a compass. There's a north, south, east, west, and two people are sitting, one on the north, one on the south, and you set the camera on the east. And so whenever you're shooting this scene, the camera always stays on the scene, even if it goes, south by southeast as it's looking at the camera, the person on the north. It never crosses into the Western territory. So that's the rule. The rule is it's going to stay on one side of that divide. And if you do break it, it's usually for some intention. It's usually as to notice a change in perspective or a new angle. Someone's understanding something differently. And so it's usually a very specific way that it's broken, usually. And in this case, they don't really hammer it home, but I just thought it was a fun way. It was when Jessica was now talking to the mother, and she was kind of getting her gullibility up and talking about like your son, he needs art therapy, blah blah blah. Did something happen to him in the first grade? And as she says that line, we pan behind Jessica, or we dolly behind Jessica as the mother gasps, like she's like, oh, and she has this big reaction to it. We're breaking the line right there as we switch sides of the room, and it's really fun. And I don't know that there's anything massive other than they're really starting to understand how gullible this woman is, and it's at that point where the story shifts into we're going full tilt into taking over this household, into our Parasite mode, I guess, to quote the film's namesake. And so the other use of crossing the line I thought was very cool was when they didn't actually cross it, but they toyed with it. And it's when they're in the cab or in the Benz, and the new dad is driving, and he's asking this question, and it's the dad is asking something to the father of the house, and we're in the back seat as the camera, we're watching the father, and then we just pan directly to our right to look at the father's response. And I hate when people cross the line.
Oh man, and let's talk about on the nose.
Yeah, and it's funny because we actually straddle the line. We don't technically break it. We never cross, but in that car ride, we're constantly toying with crossing the line, but I would say we never technically do. There's a lot of shifting in perspective, but I wouldn't say we ever actually cross the line. To some
just
degree.
like what the father says that the dad, the driver, whatever does, he always comes close to crossing the line, but he never quite does.
And so that's kind of reflected with the visual style there, and I think it's kind of Bong Joon Ho having a little bit of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the other cinematography thing that it's a weird combination of story, cinematography, and editing, I guess. But it's first shot, last shot. The first shot of the film is we open on the socks hanging to dry in this kind of underground apartment. There's trash outside, and we kind of hang there for several moments before we finally boom down to see Key Taek looking for free Wi-Fi, right? The Ip time, which I'm guessing is some kind of Ip Man reference, in which I wouldn't know how that ties into this particular story. Ip Man, I believe.
Is it not like Sprint? The Sprint of Korea, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. I just assumed it was an Ip Man reference, but maybe it is some kind of cell phone service down there. But fast forward to the final shot. The very final shot of the film is socks hanging to dry in the winter. And then we boom down as the son, Key Taek, finishes reading the letter of his dad, having painstakingly translated into Morse code. And so in this final shot, it's interesting because if you think about it in terms of first shot, last shot, nothing is actually changed. His situation has not improved from the first frame. And to some degree, it makes us question whether or not he fulfills his plan. Because for a moment, it looks like he does, as he's describing, like, I have this plan now, and we're going to do, I'm going to make money. Love and relationships and all that stuff is fine. But my purpose right now is to make money. And then we go from that, seeing that image of him letting his father out of the basement and into the sun to enjoy the backyard. we then cut to that last shot of, oh, we don't know if that actually happens. That's kind of his vision of the plan. And so it makes us ask, does he ever actually fulfill his plan? Or is it like his father said, that plans are useless? And to that, I don't really have an answer. I don't know if you want to take a stab at, do you think he fulfills his plan?
I think I do. I think he does. Or I think I do think that he does. Does that work? Only because I think that this is somewhat of an autobiography for him, and being able to do stuff like buy his mother a house and stuff like that now in his life with his art is a little bit of a statement of that. But like any great storyteller, you don't give away any, like one of the reasons we love Christopher Nolan so much is because we don't know how any of his films really end. And there's something special in that, because it's your movie now, no matter what happened in it, no matter how many millions of people see it and how many awards it wins, it's like, at the end of Inception, it's my movie because I choose the ending. At the end of this movie, it's your movie because you get to choose the ending. Does he really get to, does he make the money and get his dad, out? Who knows, man? Who knows? I'm an optimist, so I just say yes, usually because it makes me feel good. But maybe not. But the point is that because I can choose it, and the storyteller's given me the option to choose it, it feels like it's my movie now. I think so. I think it happened.
That's awesome.
What about you?
I couldn't really make up my mind. I think in my heart, I'm a bit of a negative Nancy on this film. Like, everything is so dark and so twisted and so full of hope and prospects and failure that that's kind of where I land. I love that moment whenever he's the son, Taek, is upstairs with the daughter, Hai, and he asks her, like, do you think I belong here? Does it look like I fit in? And I mean, she's a kid, but she does her best to assure him that he does. And but we can see, and I know exactly how that feels. Bro, I've been over at your in-laws' house many a time and looked around and said, do I belong here? Do I fit in? And I guarantee I probably never would have said yes to that. If I had asked that aloud, I'd have been like, anyone who says yes is lying to me. Like, I just wouldn't have believed them. And so I understand that feeling. But I guess, if I were to look at my own life in that same light as maybe Bong Joon Ho is, then I might have to say, yeah, it's a matter of believing and, working on it, like developing a plan and executing the plan, and changing the plan as you need to, I guess. I don't know. So I think my optimistic side wants to believe, if I'm putting myself in that place, that, yep, it works. He figures it out and he makes it happen. He gets his dad back and sets him free. Yeah.
Who knows, really?
Yeah. Touching on writing and story, once again, not a ton of notes, but there were some fun things that I like as a writer when I'm watching these things. Setups and payoffs I thought were pretty cool. Seeing the sister forge effortlessly that the document, the college document that he needed, or at least that he thought he needed, was pretty cool, because it ends up that the doc wasn't actually important at all. Like, he just needed the recommendation of men. But what it does do, it's a setup that doesn't pay off with him getting the job. It pays off in getting his sister the job as an art teacher. And so it's a really great red herring that, hey, we think the character thinks he needs a thing, so we're going to show you a skill set of a daughter that's going to come into play in a way that you may not have expected. And so that's kind of a very clever, simple, subtle twist of, we're going to give you exposition in a way that it doesn't look like it's exposition. That's the hardest freaking thing to do in a movie, man. It's to tell someone's backstory or to give someone a thing without it feeling like it's just being spoon-fed to you. And it's just brilliant. I love it's the simple things that are the hardest to do.
Totally.
The other thing I really liked is there was a kind of a setup payoff to the tension that is created a little later on after Jessica gets introduced to the new family. There's this great moment whenever he goes upstairs. The Taek is upstairs with the daughter, and the daughter looks at him and says, "Jessica's not really your cousin's friend." And that look, that the heart just stops beating, and he's like, "What do you mean? Like, is she on to me?" And then she makes the comment like, "She's your girlfriend, isn't she?" And it's just this great setup payoff of tension, because the first thing you think is, "Oh crap, she's onto us," and then the payoff is that no, she has a crush. And so in that same way, you've kind of added an expositional element of tension, and you relieved it through the prospect of love, and now you've kind of created a new storyline out of this thing that could have gone either way. It should have gone one way, but you used it to create tension and resolution to set us on a whole new path and a whole new storyline that lasts until the end of the movie. And that's just a really kind of clever thing that they did. The other minor writing and storytelling note is when we get to the midpoint is whenever we finally have the big twist, and it ends, that midpoint kind of starts coming to a crescendo, I guess, whenever they're coming home. And now the phone rings and everything is starting to really break loose. And what's great about that phone call that I personally love is we're getting close to the end of the phone call, and the stakes are just at a premium, right? We have the old housekeeper is going into allergic shock, right? She's had all the peaches rubbed all over her face.
Yeah.
The house is a complete wreck. The old family needs to be handled. This is before the woman gets kicked down the stairs.
Right.
And so we need to get out. Like, we got to get everyone who shouldn't be here needs to leave, disappear. And so all these things need to happen in 8 minutes. And it ends with, and
they have to cook the food.
That's the zinger. That's the
great. Sorry.
It's perfect, because it's the greatest zinger in the world, because we have all these other things that we're thinking about, and she hangs up the phone and she says, "What the hell is Ramdon?" So
yeah. Sorry, I ruined that.
That's perfect. Because it's so good. It's a great capper, because our mind is on all these other things that are already presented to us. And this adds to the disaster in this really fun, quirky way, because now she also still has to be a good housekeeper.
Yeah, now she actually has to do her job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is so smart, and it's just a fun way to add just a little extra tension and kind of shift our attention a little bit.
Yeah.
Contextualizing art. This one is...
Yeah, this is interesting. What are you talking about here?
Yeah, so it's often, not always, but it's often important if you want to understand a piece of work, understanding the context of that work makes a much better experience of understanding the art itself. And so I worked with your wife in the University of Texas Department of English that she worked for at the time, in order to make a whole series of videos. And one or two of these videos touched on exactly this, contextualization. And that's the idea that if you want to understand Shakespeare, fine, you can read it, but you're probably not going to get as much out of it if you don't understand the time period that it was written, and the cast of characters that were running his country, and a whole host of other things. The way they used words back then was different from the way we use them now. And so if you don't understand the context, you're not going to get quite as much out of it. And so whenever you're watching any movie or reading a book, whether it's Great Gatsby, you might think that the time period itself plays the biggest part of the contextualizing. But when we're watching a film made in Korea, contextualizing can take on a whole new world, because I don't think the Western world has really interpreted this movie properly. I think on its face it works because there's this universal idea of rich and poor that every culture understands. Just about. I'm sure there's probably a handful out there that are above it or whatever. But for the largest part, like, everyone who's going to be watching this movie understands it, and so whenever we watch it, we understand it in those terms. I'm not so sure it's really about that. I think on its face that it works, and that it's that's one of the reasons why this is a great film, is that you can watch it a number of ways. And on its face, it is about that. But I think if you were to really dissect it, it's talking about something completely different. And that's the coolest part to me. And I don't know that I know what this is about, but I kind of know what it's about. Like,
Okay.
at a very high level, I believe it's about North and South Korea.
Totally.
And they say literally, like, there's that moment after Jessica comes home and she's like, I set a trap for the driver, right? She takes her panties off in the car and stuffs them under the seat. And the son, Taek, kind of looks around and he's like, wow, we're going into this already? This is so metaphorical. Like, and they're literally telling you there's a metaphor in play in this film. And so it wouldn't be a metaphor if the metaphor was about the contrast between rich and poor. Like, that's not a metaphor. That's just what the film is. So the metaphor has to be something else that they're disguising as this story. And that's where I think North Korea comes into play, because there's several North Korean references, and there's a lot of allusion or reference to other countries as well. The United States, Japan, there's Native Americans. There's a lot of other countries kind of being referenced here in cultures in a way that I can't pin down 100%, because again, contextually, I'm not Korean. I just don't understand everything that happens in their culture. Like the song that she sings at the doorbell whenever she's remembering, apparently that's like a very famous nursery rhyme over there. Like the tune, the melody of it is very, 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 very famous. And so we don't know that. To us, it's just like, oh, she turned their backstory into a song. But
yeah, that's interesting. That's what I thought.
Yeah, and so for them, it's like, oh, that's funny. They use this Baba Black Sheep as, a way to remember their evil, like, or whatever, their backstory.
Yeah.
And so contextually, there's a lot that changes once you understand, or if you were from Korea, I'm sure, especially. But let's just touch on a few of the North Korean references. For one, there's this comment whenever he's in the car with the driver, and the guy asks him, like, do you know your way around? He's like, I know anything below the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel is the dividing line between North and South Korea. So there's this comment that I know anything, in South Korea. I can get you anywhere.
South Korea.
And so that's a very subtle thing that if you don't know that, you don't know that. Like, there's nothing in the movie that's going to explain that to you. And similarly, well, maybe not as similar, but there's this great moment after the old housekeeper films them, and she's now giving her husband a back rub on the couch, and he's like holding the phone, and he makes this comment comparing the video to the North Korea firing a missile. Like, he's like, this feels like a missile launcher. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, North Korea, could fire a missile at any time. Like, we could obliterate, and it just turns into this thing that eventually turns into the phone gets loose, and now they're all kind of wrestling control over the, quote unquote missile launcher. And there's just a lot in there that I think they're trying to say that, and they compare, I think, the mother to gullibility, or maybe there's a reference of the United States at some point. I forgot to write it down. But I would say, and there's also the Japanese warship reference whenever she's talking about how to set up the backyard for the party. She's like, imagine that's a warship, a Japanese warship, and build a semicircle around it of ships or whatever. It could be construed as a blockade of some sort, or maybe military bases. I don't know. And then they dress up as Native Americans, and then there's a absolute slaughter. And so I just don't know. I would imagine that there's a heavy metaphor going on about North and South Korea, who they are in this film. I don't know. Maybe they're both. Maybe both families that are the basement dwellers and the family that we're watching. Maybe they're both representing North Korea, and maybe the other family, the well-to-do family, is South Korea, or maybe the basement family is North and the other family is South, and maybe everyone upstairs is like the United States or in the South Korean government. I don't know. There's so many places that this could go. I'm afraid I just don't have the tools to break it apart. And maybe it's not all in the film. Maybe you just have to understand the culture to see what actions correlate to historical fact. I don't know. I bet it's there. Maybe because I don't know.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I saw that. I sensed that as well. I feel like maybe from that first, in any reference to North Korea, it was like, okay, I get it. I missed the first one that you mentioned. What was it? The first.
Oh, the 30th parallel.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool little nugget where, if you don't know that, you don't know that. But I kind of sense that I didn't know that the whole movie might be a metaphor for it. But now that you mention it, I can definitely see that being the case. Because do they mention a North Korean leader? Do they mention?
Yeah, they do. Like, oh, I'm
they
Kim
mention
Jong-un.
his name, right?
Yeah,
Kim Jong-un, right?
Yeah,
they mention his name at some point. Yeah, okay, cool. And I do remember having like a visceral reaction to that, of like, oh shoot, like, what if he sees that? Like, he's kind of a crazy dude. He might retaliate, And I wonder, are the South Koreans, are they like nervous now about that? Do they live in some perpetual fear, of North Korea? I don't know. I kind of probably would. I don't know. But it did seem like there was a lot of on the nose references to North Korea, or at least a handful.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I just wish I could understand a little bit more of the history so that I could pinpoint, like, is the father coming out of the basement supposed to be North Korea? The citizens of North Korea finally getting their chance to come out and join the world? And if so, is the son then South Korea, whose goal it is to make money in order to establish that and kind of help them out and buy all the land, right? Because the house is the thing that's kind of housing the dad, and he can't escape it, and therefore the people of North Korea can only be helped by the people of South Korea, who can ultimately buy the land or whatever. I don't know what the stakes are and what the issues are, and who could represent
they already
who.
Can't. Yeah, so like South Korea's economics are like way.
Oh yeah, it's not even close.
Like North Korea is the destitute family.
Yep. For sure.
So, are they the parasite?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of ways you can interpret this. Like, if you start thinking about international politics, it takes on a whole other role, and depending on who you insert into which position, is the United States the gullible mother, who just kind of sleeps around and trusts everybody and says, we have a belt of trust here. And, I only trust recommended people from the people that I know. And that seems like something that we do. Or we could also be the rich daddy who's, paying for everything and isn't really present ever. There's just so many things. And my last little note is, I love, and this is completely kind of aside from everything we just were talking about, when they're sitting down with their Native American garb and they're waiting for Jessica to present the cake so that they can pretend to be, attacking her. There's this great moment whenever the father is looking at Mr. Kim, and Mr. Kim is like suddenly having all these hesitations. He's just got so much anger and resentment over being looked down upon, and the smell, kind of this recurring issue of how he smells, and the father can see the hesitation, and he's like, look, just think of it as part of your work, okay? And then we cut and we watch Mr. Kim as he considers this, and he never responds. We keep waiting for him to acknowledge it, and at least nod a head or say okay, and we watch him for a good 4 or 5 seconds, and he never does. He just kind of keeps watching him, considering, and then we cut away. And I love that. I love that because it's so much easier as an actor to nod and acquiesce. And whether it's the director or the actor's choice, I don't know. But the fact that he didn't is a really strong acting move, to just be and to not give in. And it makes sense that he wouldn't, because, in about 2 minutes, he's about to slaughter that guy. But the temptation is to satisfy, as a human being, the question. Someone asks you a question, you give them an answer. And it can be hard sometimes to not. And the not part is what's interesting, because now the audience is wondering. You're making us ask a question, and you're creating tension, and it's all through the lack of a response, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful moment.
God.
It's so tense, man.
So tense.
It's so tense. When he says that, I'm like, oh my God, what is going to happen? Something's going to happen finally after an hour. Hour and 20 minutes, something's going to happen. It's a great moment.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's all I got, man.
Man, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff. What would you give this then? What would you give it the first? Okay, we have to do two. The first time you saw it and then the second time.
That's a really good one. I would say the first time I saw it, I would put it about a 7.5. Like, I really enjoyed it. The rewatchability factor wasn't there for me. The tension and the anxiety was all there. So it got that out of me. And the weirdness of it, like coming around the corner and seeing that woman squatting between the wall and the shelf is just such a weird Bong Joon Ho moment of, what the F is happening right now? This is, I don't understand. My mind can't wrap around what I'm seeing. And those moments kind of, make up for the dull stuff for me. And so for a 7.5, and then after the second watching, I think I'm probably at an 8 now. Like, I could watch this again and enjoy it a lot more. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I would say at best the first time was a 6.5, maybe even a 6. And now I'm solid 7, maybe 7.5, but at least a 7. Best shot in the whole movie is the eyes in the stairwell.
Dude, how amazing.
Creepiest. I've seen some creepy things. That's literally the creepiest thing I've ever seen. I mean, maybe ever. It was, and even seeing it second time was even creepier, honestly. So it was unreal, the lighting and the cinematography for this. It was just like, and the thought that went behind these little moments is just fantastic. Filmmaking wise, I mean, I would give it, an 8.5, but like as a whole movie, and I think maybe if I was Korean, it would be, like you said, contextually, I knew more. I would probably give it a higher ranking. I would definitely not call it movie of the year.
Yeah.
By far, like not even in the same, like, yeah, you could nominate it, sure, but no way would I give this movie of the year. But it was more enjoyable the second time, so I will give it that. It had legs in that regard.
Nice, sure. Very cool.
Yeah.
So what are you going to recommend this week?
Cool. I might steal yours. Maybe not. You
highly
like
doubt
obscure
it.
stuff.
Yeah,
you like obscure stuff. I'm going to recommend The Host, another Bong Joon Ho film. The first Bong Joon Ho film that I saw, and I thoroughly loved it. I was like, what is happening? I had no idea what it meant or what was going on. And it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I feel like I need to go back and watch it again. So,
dude, great recommendation.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay on the Bong Joon Ho train and recommend Memories of Murder. It's based on a real life serial. I don't remember what it is, if it's one murder or serial killer or someone who pooped his pants in the train station. I don't know. But I do remember it's an excellent movie. And if you
is
really
there a poop scene in it?
I don't think there is, actually.
Okay. That was just random.
Yeah.
Okay. Weird.
It's been a long week.
I understand.
And it's so good. All the acting, all the writing, all the cinematography. You can watch this movie and study it and never get tired of learning what he's doing in each scene. Like all the blocking, it's just absolutely fantastic. And yeah, so go watch it. Memories of Murder.
Okay.
I'm not sure where you can watch it, but everything should be streaming by now at this point. Yeah. So
in the world.
So short spotlight of the week. Going to try to get back into this. Normally, I really hate spotlighting anything that's already gotten a ton of press. Like this one that I'm recommending was already Vimeo pick of the week, and it was shortoftheweek.com. And so I really don't hate pulling from those sites. But this one was so good and original and lo-fi in the best way possible. It's just brilliant.
Really?
It's just brilliant storytelling. And it's called Getting a Grammy by Derek Milton. And you absolutely have to watch it. I think it's 9 or 10 minutes. And it's freaking hysterical. It's about how he worked on a film project. Beyonce's one of her videos won a Grammy for like best music video, and he worked on that. And so he wanted to throw a party about, you know, celebrating the fact that he worked on this. And it goes down some really weird rabbit holes that you're just gonna pee yourself. It's so good. Yeah, cool. So and I'll embed that in the show notes. And
I'm gonna watch it as soon as I'm done. I have it queued up right here.
Good. Stay tuned and it's such a good one to study just whenever you start thinking about how can I make something that is smart and doesn't require much more than just thought and a little bit of editing. And so study it. It's fantastic. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to tackle The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Very exciting. We might do a string of these where there's a few other 90s films that I've been wanting to get into. And so we'll see how this goes.
Maybe we can identify why it's played literally every single day on cable TV somewhere in the world.
I would love to know, because that's what I want to study. Too. I want to study a few movies that have just insanely high rewatchability. And Shawshank epitomizes that for sure. Don't forget to subscribe, review us on iTunes, leave us a note saying what you would like us to talk about and the kind of things you find interesting. This episode was only done because Charlie requested it. So thanks, Charlie, for the request. I was going to call it a reco, and I was like, that's not a reco, that's a request. Sorry.
It's been a long week.
Been a long week.
I get it. It's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
We still got a ways.
We're over the hump. Thank you, Charlie, so much, man. I appreciate the review you dropped. And if you want to drop us a note saying all the 1,000 ways that we missed the boat on this thing, you know that we don't like to go and read other people's takes. And so maybe someone else has already figured this out, that it's not about North Korea, South Korea. It's actually about someone pooping their pants in the train station.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah, baby. All right. Well,
and if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/parasite.
Awesome. And we'll leave you with a quote of the day from Wong Kar Wai. What makes international cinema so interesting is that each territory has its own sensibility. When you look at an Indian or French film, there's a certain flavor. And even though the language is different, if the film is successful, it has something very common and understandable.
I love Wong Kar Wai. He's a Hong Kong director that up until pulling this quote out, I thought was actually a Korean director. So my bad on that. I probably said that on the show at some point. And deep apologies. But I love his work. My Blueberry Nights is really good, but if you've never seen Chungking Express or In the Mood for Love, those are just fantastic, fantastic movies, and a visual style all his own. And I love what he's saying here because it's so accurate, even though I believe that this movie is a metaphor for something completely culturally specific. Everyone can still enjoy it because it still has this universality to it that we can all understand, and it's very relatable. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love it, man. Great. I want to go check out some of his films again. It's been a while.
God, yeah, he's so good.
Cool. Good pick. Well, man, this has been fantastic. A good double session here.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. I know I did. I learned a ton about Parasite, and which kind of improved my my stake in it, I feel like. Yeah. So like Wes said, please review us, share us with your friends. Maybe one day we might have an actual sponsor. These faux sponsors are fantastic and they're hilarious, but I'm kind of getting tired of them not paying me money. But anyway, please share us and review us. All of it helps, and we really appreciate it. And thank you to our patrons and for being patient. This whole COVID stuff has really thrown a wrench in everything, but we're continuing to try to make these as often as we can. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. And join us next week. We're doing Shawshank Redemption. Just one more reminder. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.